Hey there, a non-lawyer here, back again to discuss the promised interpretation of Kuwaiti Personal Status Code. I'm assuming most of you are coming from my earlier video about Chantal and Salah's contentious marriage situation, where I explained how they likely legally did tie the knot while Chantal was on a tourist visa in Kuwait. If you are looking for that video, unfortunately this is not the one you want to watch. This is more in depth into my research, etc. So I'll link that video in the info card here as well as in the description below. In today's video, we're going to go beneath the surface of my last video by diving into my research process on Kuwaiti law. I'll be sharing my interpretations of it and then shedding some light on the often perplexing nature of Kuwaiti's legal system and how it treats foreigners. I've made sure to timestamp each section for your convenience, so feel free to hop around the topics that you are most interested in versus having to hear me drone on about things that I'm interested in instead. Quick note before we get started, although I am a lawyer, I am not your lawyer. This is not legal advice, and it's just for entertainment purposes only. For specific legal questions, please consult your local legal advisor as they will be able to better assess your specific situation. I guess one quick aside, this video is not going to be quite as scripted as the last one, just due to the nature and length I anticipate this to be. So bear with me as I might ramble quite a bit on things that I actually enjoy. Okay, anyway, let's discuss how to research laws that are outside of the country where you might live. Luckily for me, this is something that I do in my day-to-day, as is the nature of my legal practice or the area of law that I practice. It requires that I often familiarize myself with laws from different jurisdictions or other countries. So all jurisdictions means is the type of legal system that is followed in a certain area. In my opinion, the most important thing to understand before diving into researching any new law is understanding that there are different types of legal systems out there. And this can change not only from country to country, as you can see from my screen here, but also within a country itself. The easiest example I can give is in the United States, we have one type of legal system that's followed across the country, and then within Louisiana, the state, they actually have a separate type of legal system that they follow there as well, which just is beyond the scope of this video, so I won't get into it, but it is a very interesting topic. Anyway, in my opinion, the most important thing to understand before diving into any new law is that there are different types of legal systems out there. And this can change not only from country to country, but also within a country itself. So for me, my first step is to understand the type of legal system a country follows. To be honest, the easiest way to do this is through a quick Google search, although I don't personally recommend relying on it completely. Something like the page I'm showing you here, which is the Library of Congress for the United States, is a good place to start. You can click on whatever letter of the country you want, and you can click on the country itself. And from here, the Library of Congress will give you all these articles pertaining to Kuwait, and you can narrow down the topic itself. And it here has a whole bunch of topics. Personally, for me, because of the type of area I'm familiar with, I use the State Department or the International Relations Department from English-speaking countries to get my background information from for jurisdiction purposes. So, for example, if we look at the Kuwait travel advice from the UK, you can see on their website they have a local laws and customs link. This is common to almost every single country, home country when discussing a foreign country, because home countries want their citizens to act in accordance with the laws of the country they visit. So they make this available readily available, I should say. So here, the UK government has provided a lot of background information about Kuwait's local laws and customs, with one of the first things saying, please respect the tradition, customs, laws, and regulations at all times. And then from here, for me this was interesting to read, but it didn't say anything about what I was interested in, which is the type of jurisdiction or the type of legal system that they have. So then I went to Canada's website as well, and looked here and look on even the Canada's website. You can see laws and cultures for Kuwait. So we go ahead and click here. And again, the very first thing, and you'll see this for every country, is you must abide by local laws. Anyway, that's besides the point. It gives you lots of different information, and here is where I found family law. But the most important thing here is that it tells me that family law matters are settled according to Kuwait's marriage law based on Sharia law, or Islamic law. And I was like, okay, I understand a bit about Sharia law based on other countries that I have encountered in my regular practice. So I said, you know what, let me check the final country that I always check, and that is the United States. And here the United States has, just like with Canada, Kuwaiti marriage law, and then for me, the fact that the Canadian website took me to this page, which is from 2019, I was kind of a bit suspect, and it's not looking like an official website, so I kind of wanted to find something else. And as you can see, there are a lot of error pages, so not really sure what's going on here. So I kind of kept doing some research and went to the United States, U.S. Embassy in Kuwait's website, which here gave me a lot of information, gave me background, and gave me the legal system of Kuwait. So it even tells me the difference between Kuwaiti law versus US law. That gave me a clearer understanding of what I was getting into. And then, not only that, but it gave me this little tidbit of information where it tells me that where I can find basically the codes or the actual law for the area that I'm interested in. So I was interested in marriage, so I read through this as well as a bit of a background, and from there I had a good understanding of where to start. And this is personally how I often start my research, usually on my home country's department, State Department's website, or embassy website. However, like I mentioned as I was going through those, I use these websites just for background information and not necessarily my primary source of law, because it's guiding me to understanding the primary source of law and where to find it. In legal practice, primary sources are things like legal statutes or codes, and these are the key because that is what actually governs the people or any action taken by the people. Sometimes, depending on the judicial system, which we talked about earlier, primary sources can also include case law or how previous court cases were decided. And from there are other ways to interpret laws that go into a whole theory of legal interpretation. But again, that's something that's beyond the scope of this video, so we won't get into it, but it is really fun to learn about, and one of my favorite law school classes, which is literally one of the first ones you take as a 1L. But just know that there are ways that you can further interpret primary law that may be ambiguous or confusing, which, again, beyond the scope of this video. So the quickest way to find primary laws, like statutes or codes, is to go to the actual country in question's website. Usually it'll be in the government's judiciary or legislative sections, and as you can see for the government of Kuwait, it is within their normal, just overall government website, and it's very nicely presented to us in English, which made my life much easier. And here, if you want to get to it yourself, a lot of times you will find regulations and laws very prominently featured on government websites. If you can't find it, there should always be a little search bar for you to search and find that area. And you can see that this is the official government website, so I can trust that this is the primary source of law that I'm looking up. As I was scrolling through this website, I did see all of these wonderful laws that are very prominently displayed here, but I was looking for one in particular. And this is where I found the personal status law. Which is what I was actually interested in. And when I opened it up, I was excited, thinking I could find, the primary source of law. I was hopeful that it would be in English, but it was in Arabic, which totally makes sense because this is an Arabic-speaking country. This is the personal status law. As you can see, it's 307 pages long, and it is all in Arabic, which for someone like me, which this is not who it's written for, who does not read or speak or understand Arabic, was a bit of a stumbling block. If I run into a situation like this during my normal practice, I usually turn to certified translation services for complete translations of the sections that are pertinent to the arguments or the whatever I'm trying to find. But for the Chantal video, I relied on Google Translate to read through the law, simply because it was not that serious. I'm not in a court of law trying to argue the basis of this statute or of this code. So that did cause me some hesitancy of just relying on my own interpretation. And to be honest, anytime I'm reading laws that are not where I practice anyway, I always turn to further research to understand the exact specifics of the law. Again, this was especially true in this situation because I was relying on Google Translate to understand the law itself. When I need to do research like this, what I do is I turn to reputable secondary sources. I don't know why my voice went out like that. The reputable secondary sources I usually use are things like the United Nations Digital Library, which you can see on screen, the UNHCR or United Nations Human Rights Council's document repository, and you can see from both of these pages that you can search by any keywords. For me, the easiest thing to do is search by the country I'm interested in. So for the document repository here, I selected Kuwait as my country, and then because I was interested in the actual legal information, I did click that category and tried to look through to see if there was anything that was of interest based on what I needed, which sometimes you get perfect results that will give you the exact translation of a law. So here, the UNHCR has a full translation of the nationality law, Kuwait's nationality law, which discusses how a non-citizen can become a citizen of Kuwait, which was really interesting to read through, but not what I was actually looking for. After a bit more digging, I did find a full translation of the personal status law, which was very helpful. And I will link this in the comments down below as well, just so you can have access to it as well. Okay, so that is, my first go-to is the United Nations. And the great thing about the full document repository or digital library is that you can search for anything, and it will pull up articles or any submissions that were made by the United Nations, any member states, or any organizations that have written into the UN for any purpose. And like I mentioned, sometimes you get wonderful nuggets like full translations of laws. But again, you want to kind of check things out before you just run with what's there. Because as you can see with this disclaimer, I believe I saw, here, comments. This is an unofficial translation, but it does include all changes and amendments. So with the unofficial translation, for example, if I was to try and use this in a courtroom, the judge would not accept this. They would need a certified translation. So for the purposes of a video though, on the internet, I was fine doing this. So another great secondary source that I will reference quite often is any reports made by NGOs, non-governmental organizations, or local nonprofits. So here I did review the Islamic Representation Committee, or the IPC, to see if I can find any information about what I was looking for. Now I was able to find this document which discusses marriage in Kuwait and basically provides further interpretation or explanation of the law itself. And I will link this down below as well, although Chrome says that this is not a, a secure document, so I'm just scrolling through here so that if you are interested, you can also look through it that way. I will then also review any blogs from the lawyers who actually are licensed to practice in that country. And I find that not by just Googling, because again, Google can give us incorrect information. But I go to the citizen services for the country's embassy website. So for here, example, U.S. Embassy in Kuwait has services for U.S. citizens. And if you scroll down, one of the things that they have is legal assistance. So as you can see, I've already clicked on this before, but I will go here, and usually this is where I, as expected, I have found a list of lawyers that the U.S. Embassy in Kuwait has put together. Usually this means that they have vetted them to know that they actually can practice in the area, but it does not provide a position on like whether or not they are good lawyers. So that's that. So the way that a lot of lawyers and legal offices will market is through writing blog posts about topics in areas that they practice. So a lot of times this is very useful, again, to give yourself that background information. Then finally, the last secondary source that I personally use quite often, which I won't show on screen because I cannot find the links that I used. Let's see, maybe I can find them here. Yeah. Okay, for some reason I can't find the page that I want to show, but the final secondary source that I personally use quite often is legal articles from law school journals, or legal journals in general. These articles are typically written by legal professionals and are then peer-reviewed, meaning that the editors of the journal will confirm that the information within the article is correct and accurately states whatever position the writer is taking, which in turn makes them a good secondary source. Oftentimes, the most beneficial aspect of a journal is that it gives you citations. The authors will provide citations to where they have received their information, which then could potentially give you access to even more primary or secondary sources as well. So with that arsenal, you can come up with a great plethora of resources to help understand whatever law it is that you are trying to research. As a non-legal professional, you can get a pretty good basic understanding of a law. Now, that does not negate or it does not take place of having a lawyer actually help you. I think there's a lot of gatekeeping in the legal community, which is not helpful to the society at hand, but there are times when people will not do full research and then just take a little bit and take off with that little bit and then get themselves into trouble. Anyway, I don't know why I'm going off on this tangent. Before we do move on to the next portion of the video though, I do want to acknowledge one other thing that does get people in a lot of trouble, and that's online forums. Like I said before, it is important to verify the information you get from a secondary source against the primary law to ensure its accuracy. So while forums can sometimes be helpful, always verify the information, as it's often lacking in resources or lacking in the sources that people are using to provide whatever answers they are giving, and oftentimes is incorrect or does not apply to your specific situation, which can then cause some trouble. So with that, let's move on to the next section. Okay, let's get into the Islamic family law as it is in Kuwait. Something I mentioned in the Chantal and Salah video is that for the purposes of personal status / family law, there is a divide in how the courts work for Kuwait. There is the Sharia court system, and then there is the non-Muslim courts. And really, it's a division into 3 different sections. There's the Sunni, Shia, and non-Muslim courts. But for the purposes of simplicity, we're going to go Muslim courts, non-Muslim courts, okay? Okay. Now, the personal status law governs matters such as marriage, divorce, child custody, etc. In Kuwait, and it was enacted back in 1984 and currently contains a whopping 347 articles. That's why that PDF that I showed you was so long. There have barely been any amendments to it since 1984, so what's there has been there for a while. And something to note here is that the law is very, how should I say it, not Western, in that women are not treated equally, although they do have, better treatment than some other Middle Eastern countries. It's still not, for example, what I'm used to when I'm reading laws in North America, for example. So a lot of what is in the actual code to me was a bit interesting as an outsider looking in. But back to the thing that we're here for. The code starts off actually talking about marriage. That's the very first section. And more specifically, Articles 1 through 7 discuss the engagement period prior to a marriage. So there wasn't much that was pertinent to what I was researching, so I kind of glossed over it after just doing some preliminary review of it. Chapter 2, or Section 2, which is Articles 8 and 9, discuss the pillars of marriage and basically the reasoning behind marriage in Kuwaiti law. And then the actual marriage contract portion begins with Article 10. And if you know any of the basics of contract law, including offer, acceptance, performance, then you pretty much can get the gist of what is written, or how this is written, I should say. So that is Article 10 and 11, basically just discussing the formulation of the contract that requires an offer and acceptance. Article 12 starts discussing the contractors, which is where the code explains who can and cannot enter into this marriage contract, and where I was thinking we could find the appropriate clause which would decide whether a tourist visa holder could or could not contract to a marriage, but there's nothing in there for that. Article 12 specifically provides for the validity of the marriage. The woman must not be permanently or temporarily forbidden to the man. That is the only clause there. And what does permanently or temporarily forbidden to the man mean? Well, that's where Articles 13 through 17 come in. That gives permanent prohibitions, which is like the man can't marry an incest, like can't marry your sister, can't marry anybody in your bloodline, etc. And then Articles 18 through 23 list the temporary prohibitions, which to me as a Westerner, this is where things got, to put it in a very insensitive way, to me got very funny. Like, you have to wait a certain amount of time before remarrying the woman who has divorced you 3 times. That's one of the clauses. So nothing in there, again, that really was discussing the issue that I was researching, so I just kept moving forward. Articles 24 through 39 discuss the eligibility, which is also a place I would have expected to find information about whether a foreigner is prohibited from the marriage contract. Yet again, I was not able to find anything, as the articles mainly discuss the requisite mental state to enter a valid marriage contract, which basically means like can't be legally insane or have to be of a certain age, etc. And then from there, the section on marriage basically discusses the dowry, the assets, and other things that, because they did not apply to the situation, my brain kind of shut down on. So that's that. And if you can hear my dog just going ham, licking herself in the back, I'm so sorry. But I hope this kind of showed that the requirements for marriage and the laws get quite complex when it comes to Kuwait, just because they do have different courts that oversee different types of marriages based on an individual's religious affiliation, and for a very specific type of marriage, aka Muslim marriage or Islamic marriage, I apologize, where the bride, quite frankly, does not matter. Neither does her status. I guess the easier way to look at this is if the roles were reversed, let's say we have a Kuwaiti woman who is wanting to marry her significant other. I have to use male in this situation because we are dealing with Kuwait. So Kuwaiti woman who wants to marry her boyfriend, who is not a resident or citizen, that would not work because the contract is not between the bride and the groom. It's going to be between the groom and the bride's representative. So even if the bride's representative is Kuwaiti resident or citizen, the fact that the groom is not is going to cause a lot of issues in the recognition of that marriage by the courts. So again, this is not, I think at one point Chantal was trying to explain this, and somebody called it a loophole, which I guess if you want to look at it from a Western perspective or a Christian perspective, yeah, sure, it's a loophole, but Islamic marriage contracts are very clear, especially as they are described in the Kuwaiti Personal Status Code. And, it kind of points to, I guess you can call it a loophole, but it points to a way that the bride's immigration status just straight up does not matter. And let's be honest here, we've seen this in the media before. Think of the Before 90 Day Fiance franchise. Whenever the woman goes to a Middle Eastern country where the Islamic law is strictly followed and is visiting her Muslim boyfriend, they get married really quickly. The women are often traveling just on a tourist visa because there is this quote-unquote loophole where the marriage can happen on a tourist visa, and it often does, and Chantal is not the only person who is benefiting from this law. I guess it's one of the few benefits that women have in Sharia law. Man, I told myself I was going to keep my own opinions about Sharia law out of this, but I let that one slip. Sorry. So, generally, civil marriages in Kuwait may not be easily accessible for foreigners, particularly those on a tourist visa. However, an exception exists where a female tourist visa holder marries a Muslim resident or citizen of Kuwait. This is because under the Code of Personal Status, and as it uses Sharia law, a Muslim man may legally marry a woman, and this marriage can be registered and recognized legally in Kuwait as long as she has a representative, which from my previous video we know can be the officiator. So understanding foreign laws, particularly those concerning personal status marriages, can be a complex task due to the intricacies of differing legal systems, cultural norms, and religious affiliations. However, hopefully as we have explored today, you can see how it's possible to navigate these complexities. Please remember that every situation is unique, and this information is meant solely to provide a general understanding as to how I did my research, and it's not legal advice. This is just something I'm doing for fun. I hope you enjoyed this video. I know it's not for everybody, so I appreciate you if you made it this far. If you did and have any questions, feel free to leave them down below. If you have any suggestions, I'm here for them. And stay tuned for my next video where I will continue to address, I guess, confusion or drama through a legal lens. Bye!